The rain poured down in thick sheets, drenching Avery as she moved through the busy, dimly lit streets of London. The city was alive with flashing lights and distant honking horns, but it all felt so distant to her, like she didn't belong. Shivering in her threadbare jacket, she huddled against the cold, trying to block out the feeling of being invisible in a place that had forgotten her. As she passed a trash bin, her stomach growled. She knelt, rummaging through it. Her fingers brushed against something soft, a crumpled photograph. She pulled it out and squinted at the faded image of a glamorous woman with perfectly styled hair and a radiant smile. For a second, something stirred in Avery's chest. She felt like she knew this woman, but before she could make sense of it, she tossed the photo back into the bin. It didn't matter. Home, if you could call it that, was a crumbling shelter under a bridge. It was a small community of people like Avery, lost, forgotten, and trying to survive. She sat down with Esther, the older woman who had practically raised her since she could remember, and Tim, her best friend, who always tried to act tough, but would give his last piece of bread to someone who needed it more. Esther handed Avery a dry crust of bread. "You're stronger than you think, Avery. Don't let this world keep you down," she said softly, her eyes kind but knowing. Avery nodded, trying to muster a smile. As they quietly ate, she noticed Tim glaring at something behind her. "That guy's been hanging around for a while now," Tim muttered, his eyes narrowing. "He's creepy." Avery glanced over her shoulder. Standing a short distance away was a man, tall and shadowy, barely visible in the dim light. A chill ran down her spine. Something about him was off. A week later, Avery was back on the streets searching for something. Anything to eat. She was lost in thought when she accidentally bumped into someone. It was him. The shadowy man from before. This time, he didn't just stare at her from the distance. He stepped closer, his face partially hidden under a hood. "Avery, isn't it? We need to talk." Avery froze, clutching the small loaf of bread she had scavenged. "And why should I talk to you?" She snapped, her guard instantly up. "Because you're not who you think you are," he said calmly, as if what he had just said wasn't the most ridiculous thing ever. Avery narrowed her eyes. Her heart raced, but curiosity gnawed at her. What could this guy possibly know about her? The man who introduced himself as Warren led Avery down a quiet alley away from the busy streets. Avery knew she should leave, run away, but something in her gut told her to hear him out. "Your name isn't just Avery," Warren said, his voice low and steady. "You're Avery Sinclair, the last heir to Sinclair & Co., one of the biggest fashion companies in the world." Avery blinked, shaking her head in disbelief. "What? No, I'm nobody. I live under a bridge." Warren didn't back down. "Your parents, Esther and Victor Sinclair, vanished over 10 years ago after a scandal hit the company. Everyone thought you were dead, but they were wrong." His words sent a shock through Avery's body. Memories she had buried deep inside began to rise. Flashes of a woman with bright red lipstick and a gentle laugh. A man in a suit, always smiling down at her. Were those real memories? Could she really be the missing Sinclair heir? 1 week later, Avery stood in a giant room so fancy it didn't feel real. Chandeliers sparkled above her, and the walls were lined with expensive art. She was dressed in a sleek designer gown that fit her perfectly, but it felt wrong, like she was playing dress-up in someone else's clothes. The room was filled with people, executives from Sinclair and Company. They stared at her like she didn't belong. One of them sneered, "Look at her, she can't be the heir, she's nothing but a street rat." Avery's fists clenched at her sides, anger bubbling inside her. She could feel Tim and Esther standing in the back of the room, watching nervously, but she wouldn't back down. "You think I'm just some rat, but look at where I've been," Avery said, her voice steady but fierce. "I survived when no one cared. I'll be a better heir because of that." The room went silent. People exchanged shocked glances, and even Warren, standing nearby, looked impressed. But Avery could feel it, the tension in the air. Not everyone wanted her here. She had a long fight ahead. The real test came in the boardroom. Avery stood at the head of the table, facing a room full of skeptical faces. These were the people who had run Sinclair and Company since her parents had disappeared. They didn't believe in her. Heck, part of her didn't believe in herself, but she couldn't let that show. "You think this company's legacy is built on money?" she said, meeting each of their gazes. "It's built on resilience, and that's something I have. I will lead Sinclair and Company better than anyone, even my parents." One executive, with a smug grin that made Avery's skin crawl, leaned forward. "What do you know about running a company? You're just a girl from the streets." His words stung, but Avery wasn't about to let him win. "I know how to fight for survival. I know what it's like to lose everything and come back stronger. That's more than you'll ever understand." From the corner of her eye, Avery saw Tim and Esther exchange proud glances. Warren stood behind her, nodding in approval. This wasn't just about proving herself to these executives. It was about proving something to the girl she used to be. As Avery walked out of the boardroom, her head held high, she felt a whirlwind of emotions: pride, fear, and determination. She had fought her way back from the shadows, but her journey was far from over. Warren caught up to her in the hallway and handed her a sealed envelope. "This was left for you," he said, his expression unreadable. "Be careful, Avery. Not everyone is happy about your return." Avery took the envelope, its weight heavy in her hand. What could it be? A dark family secret? A warning? Whatever it was, she knew her story was just beginning. From the streets of London to the heights of a fashion empire, Avery learned that her past didn't define her. It shaped her. She wasn't just an heir to a fortune, she was a survivor, and nothing could stop her now. Share and like for more bold stories by boldfacemakeup.com.